Okay. During this talk, we are going to deep dive into an example of a progressive web app using a serverless architecture, but built with Firebase and Node. So Laura is a web developer advocate, human Techmakers ambassador, and Google developer expert on Firebase. So thank you, and have a nice session. The stage is yours.
All righty, thanks, Santino. Grazie, as you said. Hi, everybody. How are you? Well, very first time doing this talk for GDG Italy. I hope that you're having a good time there. Please write down in the chat. I know that you've been following amazing talks all around and learning amazing things. But this time, I would like to do it more interactive. So I'm gonna tell you a secret. I've been trying to prepare my slides a few weeks ago, but I don't want you to just sit there and listen to me and that's it. I want to make it a little more like a dialogue. So please feel free to say hi, to share your thoughts. I have a few questions for you that I need your help. So let's start with this. We're gonna talk today about progressive web apps, serverless architecture, and more stuff. It sounds a little bit complicated, but it's not actually. So if you are a web developer, if you're a mobile developer, if you're interested in architecture in Firebase, this is a good spot for you. So let's start with the presentation. Please write down how are you, or so I can see that I'm not on my own talking. So ciao everybody, my name is Laura and I code for developers. I work at Samsung Research UK and I'm a web developer advocate. What it means is that what we are trying to do is to check which are the best practices for developers, trying to engage with the developer community, and then try to see how we can help developers to create better products. So part of my job is to, for example, create cool demos. So one of the things that we like to say in our team is try to leave the web better than we found it. We work around different technologies, but the web is our strong point. Actually, our department is web technologies. We work with other people trying to check which are the new standards. We work with different vendors and also partners to see, hey, what's going on with the web? How we can make sure that the web will continue a good path around all these new technologies. So one of the things that we usually do is create cool demos. Every day we try to create new projects, research about specific topics, and then try to show the whole community how they can use these demos as a good example of best practices. Usually we have small demos. Each member of the team can actually do their own demo, their own project. But this time we have a really huge challenge in our team. So let's see how it goes. We got a new platform that is called Samsung Global Goals. Samsung Global Goals is a super nice project. I'm based in London, but this project is from Samsung United States. And actually, what we were trying to do is to, why not just creating cool demos? Why not trying to deliver technologies for a good cause? And Global Goals, it was a project that is made in partnership with the United Nations Development Program. The idea of the global goals is that there are in total 17 goals, and what the United Nations is trying to do is, for example, stop poverty, hunger, and even now during these times, trying to help fight against the COVID. So our team in the United States has this amazing app. This is a native app that is called Samsung Global Goals. It's available in Android. And actually, what you can do now is learn about each goal. It's a platform that you can actually use to make donations. For example, let's say that you are interested in sustainability. You can make donations using your phone. Of course, right now we have one more goal, is to fight against COVID. So you can support your special goals and also check what's going on, which kind of impacts is happening. And besides that, monitor which donations you're using. It sounds really cool. And actually, it's available for Android. And if you have an Android phone, you can check in your favorite store and start downloading it for a good cause. But there's this thing, again, we really believe in the power of the World Wide Web. Currently, this native app is amazing, and I think recently we have like more than 1 million reached using just donations with the native app. But what if we can reach more people? What if it doesn't matter if you have an Android device or an iPhone, or if you are using your tablet or whatever device you want to use it, you can still continue having access to that content. And then why not making donations and supporting your cause? So we decided to bring Samsung Global Goals, this native app, into the web. So it was a challenge for us because in our team, we're a really small team. We are currently 4 people. And the idea was try to deliver the same experience that you can have in your iPhone or in your Android, but in the web. So we are not allowed to lose quality. In order to do that, what we did is use progressive web apps, right? So not only migrate our mobile app into the web, but also going one step further using a progressive web app. How many of you knows about progressive web app? Not sure if attendees are writing, but I'm gonna still making questions. But I hope that at the end of the day I can have some questions anyway. Okay, so if you didn't hear about what is aPWA, I will be very clear. It's just a way to have a native-like experience, right? But just using web technologies. It means that if I'm going to use the same app that I have in native, I have to have a similar experience if I'm using the web, if I'm using a browser. So I'm just going to use the same technologies, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, technologies that I'm pretty familiar with in my case, even though if you are from a web background, and sometimes you are a little bit worried about how you can reach more people using your web app without going mobile, well, this is also a good experience for that. But let's talk in terms of technology. What does it mean to create a progressive web app? There are 3 different things that you have to use. The first one, HTTPS. So you have to make sure that your app is under HTTPS, because with this is the very first step. If you want to use later other capabilities, you're not going to be able to do that if you don't allow HTTPS. And besides that, it's a good practice, especially if you're working with transactions. For example, for us, if we're going to use donations, all these transactions should be in a safe environment to respect users' privacy. Second one is have a manifest file. This property will allow you to have this ability to think that you are in a native app, because you're going to have an icon, and then it's going to be able to make your web app discoverable. I'm not going to talk about manifest file, but there's so many documentation around there. I'm going to give you some of these resources so you can actually check what's going on. But today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can actually create from a native app to a web app, in this case, a progressive web app. And the third one is using a service worker. A service worker is going to give you the ability to have offline capabilities. So one of the things that aPWA allows you, that it's going to put your web app closer to a native app, is that it doesn't matter if you are offline. At least the basic capabilities of your web app should remain, right? So if you have a native app and you don't have any connection, that's not a problem. You can still use that most of the time. But sometimes in the web, it's not made for that. We usually expect good connection and things related. So the idea is to respect the user and give them a good experience. It doesn't matter which connection, which type of connection they have. Okay, so this is aPWA and how you can actually start building it. Again, we're not going much in detail. There's a lot of information around PWAs, and this is just an intro if you didn't have the chance to know what is a PWA and why did you choose to start building a PWA. So let's see what happened behind the scenes in our team. So I got one of these screens right here that I'm gonna show you later. I'm gonna exchange a little bit of the order of these slides. So the very first one is that which resources do we have to start building this? The very first one is if you see the whole app, that actually I'm gonna switch between my slides, the app. Let me show you quickly here. This is our app, right? And if you can see, and this is actually our web app. Most of the information that we have at the very first was just data. And at the very beginning, one of our challenges was, okay, this is going to be some data that we are going to receive. For example, this car with the people, the description, right? And it's pretty simple. We can just usually use a static site because we don't have any dynamic data. The problem was that later on, we start receiving that new requirements. You know, if you work in tech, usually you know how the clients or how the projects change the requirements. And suddenly we started to receive endpoints of this information, and most of this data started to be dynamic. So what we need to do in our side is to being able to receive pictures, data, and then build the front end of these. Okay? Let's go back to the slides quickly. So we have this data. And the second challenge that we had is that we just have some design guidelines. We just knew that we have to go as closer as we can to the native app. We are not, of course, if we're gonna bring that to the web, we can go further and make things related to the web. But our main strategy is to mobile first. What does it mean to go mobile first? It means to think about mobile as your first device. So we didn't have much, let's say, freedom to choose a new design or think about different strategies. No, we really have to follow the design guidelines. It should be really similar to what we already have in our native app. And with all these, we have to create our roadmap. Okay. So let's go back to our app. And let's see what we have in terms of design. Let's take a look into our app. In terms of design, what you can see is not much hard to follow. But anyway, it's really tricky because we knew that we had some cards and we have to populate these with some information around. So what we did is we used one UI web. Let's go back here. We use one UI web. As you can see here, you see that the cards are like square or and you have trendy colors. And this one UI web is a pattern design that Samsung made. And actually, if you have a Samsung phone, you would see in all your operating system that it works like that, with these type of icons that are kind of rounded corners. And I don't know about you, I think we are in the front end session, but I will tell you a secret, I'm not really good with design. So I have to, if I have a tool or something that works for me to make it as much accurate as possible to the native app, much better. So what we use is One UI Web. One UI Web is a library that you can use for following the One UI design pattern during this your front end. So it works like a bootstrap, but it will actually follow One UI design principles. And besides that, we add CSS, simple CSS, okay? That basically we were having dark mode or light mode and change some of the cards. So how did we build the cards? We create some components. Let's go back here. We create some components, and what we did is create different types of cards that actually you have, let's say, vertical card or horizontal card or video card, and we just received the information that we had in our endpoints, and we started to build these cards. Pretty simple. Again, that's how we manage data, and everything that you see here, how the cards are building, the menu and everything is available. One UI Web is open source. You can check our GitHub, and it's pretty simple to use. Okay, that's the easiest part of this project. But now let's see the other part. That's the one that I'm pretty interested in to show you today. So we have to think, okay, at the very beginning, we said that we have this information just static. We were not expecting to have dynamic data. And at the very beginning, one of our first option was to use just a static side, everything rendered to the client side, not any problem at all. Later, we have dynamic data. So we were expecting to receive endpoints, external endpoints with some data, and then process that information and then deliver that into our front end. We were still thinking that why not, considering client-side rendering is the easiest way. We don't have to have any database at all, or we didn't have to actually use any other third resources. So our first option was doing client-side. But let's see what happened. Do you remember the slide that appeared? I don't know why appeared at the beginning. That's another secret. This slide happened. I don't know if you have the chance to see these ones. What we were doing is calling the endpoints from the client side to retrieve that data. And we have this course error. It says, okay, you don't have access to no access control allow origin. At the very beginning, for me, maybe you already have the experience of this, but on my end, it was the very first time, and I was not sure about what was happening. The problem is that we have a certain kind of security, and these external endpoints that we were using were not allowed to have it from the client side. At least that this third person or the third party allows you to use your endpoints in the client side, you're not allowed to have it in the client side. So, well, at the very beginning, we thought that it was pretty simple, but it was not. So our second option was putting that information into the client side, sorry, into the server side, no more client side. In the client side, what we did is just rendering our front end. So in the server side, we were, okay, let's try to use something simple to actually receive those endpoints with the keys and the proper user and retrieve that information. So we did this doing something pretty simple. Let me show you some code. If you are still there, hope so. Who is there watching? Okay, let me show you the following. I hope that you can see my screen. This is our local test. It's a pretty simple server, right? Let me put this a little bit. If you don't have any experience with Node, that's okay. I hope that you can learn something useful today. But if you're already familiar with Node, I'm trying to show you what we did for the backend side of this. So what we did is use Node. Yes, we used Node because we were using just JavaScript for the front end to use rendering. We didn't use any other framework because even though this is a huge challenge for us to do this kind of project, because it's usually a little bit bigger than the ones that we do personally, we try to keep it simple, and it's not as big as we can expect. So we keep it just with JavaScript, not any other frameworks. So as we've been using JavaScript in the front end, and I really like Node also, we decided to continue with Node. So how we use the endpoints here, we use, this is a library that I really like. It's called Node Fetch. So if you are familiar with fetch in the front end, let me tell you that you are also available to use fetch in the back end. And I found it pretty simple. And you can actually use fetch with a wait async, so you don't have to go around promises, and it's much easier to walk through the code. So how do we do this? We actually call the endpoints. This is one of our endpoints. We retrieve some of the information here, right? And then, as you can see, we use async await fetch. This is our URL. We were using post, and then we were using await here. So every time that we open our app, using fetch allows you to actually manage your data and do it much more simple as other ways. That's the reason why we choose to use fetch. And with this, we were able to retrieve our data from external endpoints. And then we were using this part of the backend to actually have it in our front end. So for example, this one, as you can see here, is wallpapers, are, for example, some of the images that we are expecting to show to the user in the cards that are called wallpapers. What else do we have here? So once that we started to use Node.js for retrieving the different API, the different data that come from the APIs, we were like, okay, this works super cool. We're using localhost. Our project is running. We were able to retrieve and build much endpoints and manage our data from our app. But then later we were like, okay, we need to put this information somewhere else. We need to actually have hosting. And then I don't know if you have the chance, but if I'm trying to make things as much simple as we can, and so we were like, okay, we don't need any database. We don't need to host these anywhere else, because we are all using external endpoints. We're not like processing data. So we don't need to host these in other server, proper server. So that's where Firebase arrived. And if you don't know what is Firebase, Firebase is a multi-platform that you can use for your app. It has different functions. For example, a database. If you have an Android app or iPhone, you can use testing and so many things around. But we decided, first of all, for the architecture, go serverless, because we didn't have to host any backend at all. We don't need to do much processing around data at the moment. And even though, like right now, next steps are going to build donations and everything, we don't need actually to do transactions around data. So we decided to go serverless. And let me show you how does it look like. There is a trick here for Firebase. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we are doing our call to these endpoints using Node, right? And then our next step was to host this information somewhere into the backend. We decided to go with Firebase. But the trick is that when you're calling endpoints, you have to use cloud functions, okay? So for example, here I have my app.js. That's the one that I'm going to execute if I'm going to test it locally. And then here, what I do is use Firebase functions. Thanks to Firebase functions, and I'm not talking, this is not really old, actually. It's possible thanks to, I don't know, let's say 3 years ago. I can host not only the front-end side, because before Firebase was just available for hosting static sites. Thanks to that, I have to migrate this backend with Node thanks to Cloud Functions. So I have this project here that it will have the same thing, but here I'm gonna call Firebase. And thanks to that, what I'm again, it's the same thing. I'm gonna use Express, Node Fetch, HTTPS, and here I'm gonna call my APIs. What's the difference? The difference is that this part of my project will be hosted by Firebase. And right now, here, this is the main difference if I test it locally. My functions are gonna run in Cloud Functions, thanks to Firebase functions. So every time that I open my app, it's gonna call Firebase first, okay? What is a good thing about doing this? First, something that you have to know, that at the very beginning, when we implement this with Firebase, if you are gonna use external endpoints, as we did, you actually have to, this is a secret tip number 14, you have to allow a build card. Why? Because if you're not using external calls to APIs, that's fine. But if you're using external APIs, you have to allow the build card, because you can actually, I think in total per month, you have up to 2 million calls. I mean, it's pretty fine. If my app is super successful and it's having more than 2 million calls per month, I think I can pay. I assume that. So once that you allow your build card, your app will start working. This is our functions that are hosted in Firebase. And besides that, let me show you something else. I was telling you that thanks to Firebase, we have the ability to use functions. But what about hosting? Thanks to hosting, I was able to retrieve a really nice URL. Here, as you can see, it's called Samsung Global Goals web app. And actually, I've started to host this. This is our first release. It's not in beta yet, but I would like you to take a look, because right now we're working in different things. And once that you go and using hosting, you can actually connect Firebase with analytics. It's available for also using PWAs, because you can use storage. Another different strategy that I have to tell you is service workers, how we manage images, the ability to have it offline, etc. Right? So this is basically how we build our app. Again, trying to recap this, we use simple CSS using One UI Web. It's an open source project. We use for, let me just go back here, these streaming things. I hope that you are having fun as me trying to, being a YouTuber today. Okay, so going back to the architecture, we have the server side. We were using One UI for the front end, simple CSS. And we also been using JavaScript, plain vanilla JavaScript, to retrieve these components for our site. And for the backend, we were using a serverless app using Firebase, and hosting our functions, our calls to the endpoints in a pretty simple way, and also having our own hosting with Firebase. So you do probably are waiting, okay, let's see the live demo, and here with the live demo is where everything is screwed up and nothing works. I have to challenge myself, and more than a live demo, sorry about that, I opened something that it was not okay. Even more than a live demo, I already know which things are not going well. So I'm gonna tell you in advance what's going on. If you go and visit some Samsung Global Goals web app, this is live already. Again, we are testing this. This is not even in beta. There are a few things that we still have to manage. First of all, one of the main things if you are building a aPWA is that you need to be able to have, this should be fast, okay? Our main problem is that we still struggle with first load. So our first load is still not okay. It's pretty slow because we are receiving images from different resources and sometimes change the way that it looks like, but we are working on that and it's improving. The good news is that in the next loading, it works really well thanks to our cache strategy to work it offline with images and resources. The second thing that you have to know about this app, we were testing this, we were really happy about how it looks like. It feels closer to our native app, but we cannot say that it's a aPWA cross-platform that works everywhere, because let me tell you another secret. It looks really bad in Safari. Safari is a different vendor. It's a browser that we are trying to do as much as possible to work together and try to also put PWAs closer to every vendor. With Safari, it's like we have to do more research about PWAs. So if you want to test this in an iPhone, you will see that it looks completely awful, and actually it's not even showing the ability to have a PWA. So that's another secret. Anyway, right now we're working into two main things. The first thing is the ability to give the user the power to donate through this web app using different types of payments. And the third one is that actually we want to make this open source. I believe that this should be an example of the best practices of a progressive web app. We are trying to document everything as we can. We're trying to put highly importance to performance. So there's a lot of things to do with this app yet. And as you can see, I have already installed my progressive web app here. Do you remember that at the very beginning, I told you that thanks to aPWA, you can actually have a similar experience to a native app? Well, this is already installed as an app. It's a web app, and I'm using Chrome this time. And if you see this icon here, you can check that I can open this as a web app. It feels like a desktop app already. Again, sometimes we need to improve the way that how we render images. You can see a few things, improve our front end, endpoints. But that's our main idea, to deliver something that we can show as a good example of how to use aPWA, how people can make technology for good, and why not make a good impact to the world with United Nations. So yes, if you have the chance to check this website, or if you have any feedback or whatever you want to reach out, please let us know. We're also working into another cool projects to show how developers are working in their PWAs. So if you're working in PWAs, please let me know. And this is our very first talk about this project. More documentation is gonna come. I hope that you at least feel more interested about different ways to use PWAs and even Firebase in the web. So grazie mille, and I'm hoping to see a lot of questions here.
Okay, thank you, Laura, for your nice talks. So, if you can unshare your desktop, I can share the question.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. I can share now the question. Perfect. So, the first question is, can we adapt the same aPWA in easy way that adapt its layout bases on different devices, Android, iOS, UI, or we have to build one PWA for each devices, I think for the different layouts?
Yes, so I think most of the questions here are related. In terms of layout, we decided to go with mobile first. So we use One UI, and One UI, this is one of the libraries that I was mentioned before, that it will allow you to use this design pattern that Samsung create. Of course, it means that we build everything for mobile first, but then we use some CSS to particular things. For example, some things related to desktop, some things related to dark mode or light mode, and also with accessibility. Of course, you can use, there's actually good practices related with PWAs and using just one. But I'm pretty sure that for more specific things, you will use different types of styles. And one of the main examples that you can see that is, for example, with the icon that you can see for a PWA, that it feels like it's a native app. For most Android phones or most vendors, you just use one. But for example, in the case of Safari or an Apple device, you have to use a different icon. So in terms of front end, you can go with just one style and make specific things. But with some kind of stuff, let's say that we have to check how it works in different stages. That's why one of our mistakes were, oh my God, in Safari, it looks awful. So yeah, that I really suggest to take a look into everything. Of course, we were pretty happy, pretty proud about how it looks like in Android, most Chromium vendors. But then, oh, what about Safari? No.
Oh no,
But
oh no.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Which design pattern do you suggest for great PWI?
Yeah, so I think this question is related with the last one.
Previous. Okay.
Yeah, with the last one. Anyway, the one that we were using for this, and most of the projects that we are creating right now is using One UI, this design pattern made by Samsung. I think that there's a lot anyway. I even use material design for others. But if you're curious about how you can use One UI web, it's an open source project, and actually we build the library in our team to make sure that you can have a good experience using a PWA.
Okay, and all browsers are compatible 100% with the PWI, or they are no?
Yeah, again,
No.
most of Chromium browsers are available for PWA features, and even with Safari and other vendors. What's the tricky question here? What's tricky? Make sure about which are the features required per each vendor. if you're using a Chromium browser, let's say Chrome, or even our browser, Samsung Internet, you won't have any problem. It's like you need to have a manifest file, the icon, etc. But with other browsers, there are other requirements that you have to check to actually make sure that the user will see a aPWA. So again, if you're not sure, and that's something that I asked to the community, if you're not sure about where is the documentation of leading a good PWA in center vendor, or how actually is I make sure that I create a valid PWA, please reach out to different vendors, even us, because our work is to make sure that you have all the resources, and to create a PWA, it should be clear for everybody.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Laura, for the next presentation. And
That's it.
now we can leave this room and see the agenda for another talks after a virtual coffee break now. But thank you.
Okay,
And
I want to have a cappuccino.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.